Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here. I'm Dr. Kali Namdar. I'm the Resilience Programs Coordinator at Ohel Children's Home and Family Services, and we're so thankful that you've taken the time out of your busy day to join us to hear more about our resilience-related resources and the brand new workbook, Inner Space, My Resilience Workbook, that we're so happy to be able to present to you two today. Today's webinar is called Resilience in Challenging Times. You're going to hear more about our resources from our incredible panel today and other resources that span a range of ages. Our approach in the work that we do with school communities, with educators and parents as well, is really about building resilience and putting it at the front and center of everything that we do. And we really believe that building resilience is a parallel process and it's a journey. And the work begins with us. Teachers and training teachers directly has really been the focus of our work because we see teachers as central to this process of building resilience and bringing it into our school communities. We know that teachers are with their students, sometimes even more than parents are with their children. And teachers really lead their classrooms. They're the anchor in the classroom through times of calm, through times of crisis, and through times of chaos, and really in dealing with the overwhelm that so many are facing with the crisis in Israel unfolding at the moment. We're really thankful that we have Dr. Naomi Bal here with us today. Dr. Naomi Bal is live from Israel and is doing the work on the ground, and we're so thankful to be working with Naomi and really working with a leading expert in the field of trauma, in the field of resilience. We're going to hear from Naomi soon on the work that she is doing on the ground in Israel. We have Tzivi Ryder, the Director of Children's and Trauma Services at Ohel, who's really spearheading our trauma support work, especially at the moment now in navigating the crisis in Israel, both here and abroad, and also spearheading the release of many resources and supports available for the general community. We also have Yuta Malka Silverman with us, a master educator and a filmmaker as well. And you can see from her background that is real, that she actually is in a school classroom at the moment. So it'll be great to hear from Yuta Malka about how, as an educator, she has been using the Resilience Workbook tool and real practical tips and guidance on how to bring this and integrate this tool into the classroom. Now, the concept of resilience is really at the core of the Inner Space, My Resilience Workbook. And we talk about, through the workbook, proactive and healthy ways of coping, overcoming fears, overcoming feelings of helplessness and burnout by high levels of stress. And we're going to hear from Dr. Baum soon about how the original workbook was created. Dr. Naomi Bal was the original creator of the workbook. Back in 2005, it was called, My Resilience Workbook back then. And the thinking that drove this creation of this resource was that there were so many children, so many families, so many individuals that were exposed to high levels of stress and anxiety in Israel. And Dr. Baum created the original Resilience Workbook as a way to help people make sense of the world around them and really build resilience through the process. We're going to hear from Tzivi Ryder in a minute, who will talk about what drove the new creation of the Inner Space Resilience Workbook. And just have in mind, as you're watching, there are many, many things that you can think about when you hear the word resilience. We throw the word resilience around all the time. We use it all the time. When you hear the word resilience, you might be thinking about students that you have. You might be thinking about colleagues that you currently work with or that you've previously worked with, or you may be thinking about experiences that you yourself have personally been through, whether it's, in dealing with the crisis that we're all seeing unfold in Israel at the moment, or other times that come to mind for you. And resilience is really a concept that has been, at the forefront of so much research and so much of a push to bring this into the classrooms. And we really believe that through the tools that we're going to talk about today, this will help educators, it will help parents, it will help people bring the tool of resilience into the classroom and make it part of the everyday language that's spoken between teachers and students and everybody that lives within the walls of the school. So, Sivi, if I could turn to you and ask you, I'd love to ask you some questions about I'd really love to hear from you about the development of this new resource. Why did you create this new Inner Space Resilience Workbook? How did it come to be?
Sure. So firstly, it's an honor to be here on this panel together with Dr. Baum, who I adore Dr. Baum. And my journey on this workbook started with Dr. Baum over 10 years ago. I also want to thank Yitamalka Silverman, who's a very busy teacher who got special permission to be here with us today to really show what it's like in the front lines as teachers, implementing this workbook with all the challenges that come in the classroom and what that actually can look like. So we really, really appreciate you all being here. And of course, Dr. Namdar, who's really kind of pulled all this together and spearheaded the rollout of this and many of Ohel school-based resources. I just want to say that thank you so much. So just to take you back a little bit on the journey for this workbook, it started, like I said, 10 years ago. After Hurricane Sandy, Ohel actually received a grant to do trauma work in the community for Hurricane Sandy. And we thought that it would be a good idea, because we're in a lot of schools, to create a resource to help kids, sort of process their feelings. And then in my research, I stumbled across a book that already existed that Dr. Baum had created. And I was like, this is the book I want to write, but it's already written, and I'm like, it already exists, like so much of what I wanted to kind of put into the workbook, like it's right here. So I had reached out at the time to Dr. Baum and to the organization she was working with at the time. And we were able to work together to create a workbook around the issues around the hurricane to help kids process, the events around the hurricane and the changes and the trauma, as well as obviously their emotions. So that's really how this whole process started 10 years ago. And that was very successful. We used it in a lot of schools. And then we kind of put that aside, and then we moved forward in our work, and we did not as much focus on written resources. And then COVID hit. Okay, COVID hit, right? Whatever it was, 3.5 years ago. And we realized that with especially so many kids at home, we said, you know what, this is a really important opportunity for us to create something now for those kids at home. And we kind of looked at the workbook and we realized, no, we really need to change it, really heavily modify it for the issues the kids were facing at the time during COVID. I'm actually going to show you a little bit what that looked like, although the focus of today is the new workbook, but I do want to show you that. And hold on one second, I'm going to share screen. So some of you may be familiar with that workbook, but this is kind of what the COVID workbook looked like. And I have to say that we put a lot into that workbook. We made a lot of changes and really developed it, again, for COVID. And in many ways, I mean, our work during that time was the very definition of resilience, because it was like the silver lining of COVID. We were kind of stuck at home, and it kind of brought out our creativity. And it started Ohel on a path of really developing many different resources for schools. It wasn't like a one-off. It really became like part of our mission, our identity, and who we are, that we started creating many, many different resources for schools and specifically for teachers. And this was kind of what launched it during COVID. So this was what the workbook looked like at that time. And I'm going to actually show you just some of the pages that really helped the kids process how they were feeling, gave them a forum and outlet for expression. It really helped teachers and parents check in with how the kids were actually feeling. We had a lot of pages. I don't want to get into it because the focus is on the new workbook, but questions they had about COVID, and we heard so many feedback, like they didn't realize kids were worried about themselves getting sick, their parents getting sick, their pets getting sick, and different things, that once they were able to kind of have that forum, and then the adults around them, teachers, and in some cases also parents and caregivers, were able to kind of address those concerns. So it was very successfully implemented. It was used by about 10,000 kids during the pandemic. And it was used probably for about 18 months, even after the pandemic. This is actually another page. Actually, this is a page, I think, from the hurricane workbook. But anyway, so then we realized, this is something that was really successful, was a great tool for kids, and that we really need to create a non-COVID version, a new version, right? For just to help kids deal with just everyday stress and to give them coping tools and to just help them, instill resilience and to build resilience. And so this was something we worked on, I would say, really over a year and a half. Again, we partnered with Dr. Baum, and we really wanted to create something that was playful, that was, fun, and that didn't feel like a work. It was something that would be like really like fun and something the kids would really want to engage with. So we worked with actually a wonderful illustrator, and a lot of thought and attention went into every page, again, to kind of make it come alive and make it be really engaging and interactive for kids. And we very, very, again, heavily changed the content and added a lot of new content based on, new research, and to really kind of add value and make it something that could really support these kids. So this is what the workbook looks like. But before I get into it and show you some of the pages, I want to talk a little bit about why a resilience workbook. So firstly, resilience is very much a part of Ohel's mission, the idea that we're building resilient communities, and that we know that there is a lot of hardship and pain in this world, and everyone is so touched by what's happening in Israel. And it's a very, very difficult time right now for the Jewish people. We can't protect people from hardship and pain, but we can help people have reserves of resilience to kind of draw upon and to help them cope during these times of challenge. And resilience, I think, is a very overused term, right? We hear it all the time, and I think it's misunderstood. I think people sometimes think being resilient means being positive. Being positive all the time, that means you're resilient. But that's not how we understand resilience. We really understand resilience in a different way. Being resilient doesn't mean that you don't feel, sadness or pain or anger or worry or distress. On the contrary, really, resilient people feel and give expression to the full range of their emotions, and they find within themselves the ability to cope with those emotions. So another way you might put it is that being resilient is having the ability to bounce forward and not backward in the face of challenge. And we don't believe that it's an all or nothing proposition. You're not resilient all the time. There's sometimes you just want to curl up in a corner in a ball and cry, and that's okay. And we also don't believe that resilience is predetermined. We don't believe that a person is born with a preset amount of resilience. We believe that resilience is a muscle that you can build and that you can grow, and that you can intentionally really develop. And this workbook, we believe, can help children grow that muscle. So that was kind of the thinking behind creating this workbook. So why do we want to sort of roll this out in schools? It can also be used and has been used by therapists, and it also can be used, with parents together with their children. But school is a really ideal setting to use this workbook with children. Why? Firstly, kids are in school most of the day. It's just like, practically speaking, it's just practically a really good setting to roll this out. And secondly, it's not a stigmatized setting, right? It's not a mental health clinic, but yet it does promote positive trajectory of mental health. We also believe that it's important for schools to kind of prioritize resilience, just like you would prioritize history and science and math, to kind of intentionally seek to build resilience, in a school setting. And this workbook is sort of a tool that can help schools do that. And the research shows that social emotional learning is actually a greater predictor of academic success even than IQ. And so it really makes a lot of sense for schools to prioritize social emotional learning. And I think we have seen a lot more of that happening in recent years. But at the same time, teachers are under enormous stress. And we definitely saw that during COVID. And actually, Ohel has been also involved with a lot of teacher support work, which Dr. Namdar will also talk to you more about, with the idea, like Dr. Namdar said, of like supporting teachers as they support students. And we feel that a lot is expected of teachers, right? You're expected to teach the kids the subjects, and you're also kind of expected to be almost like mini mental health professionals and deal with anxiety and, acting out behaviors and lots of challenges in the classroom. And those challenges have really exponentially really increased. So we realized that there's a lot put on teachers. So we wanted to create like a user-friendly tool that teachers could use without a lot of pressure on them, that they could easily carry out and implement in the classroom that's scalable and replicable. And again, giving them a tool to check in how kids are doing and give over skills in a natural and sort of organic way. So that's kind of the thinking behind the workbook and using it specifically in a school setting. And I want to also say, and you're going to hear more about this, I think, from all of our speakers, especially Yitamalka, it is not, this is not the be all end all. It's a starting point. It's kind of like a springboard, to be able to kind of carry out these concepts and build on these concepts and build on these lessons. And it's most effective when teachers sort of model the language and the concepts in the book. So, and you'll hear more about that. But that was some of the thinking that went into why we developed this workbook and why we want to use it specifically in schools.
Thank you, Tivi. Okay, I think it was really helpful to see the images of how children had completed the COVID workbook that you had created together with Dr. Baum, and really see how children, are invited to bring their own expression and really work with the workbook at their own pace. I'd love to ask you, is this workbook meant for, excuse me, for all children, or would you say, it's preferable to use it for some more than others? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I'm very happy to elaborate on this because I feel really strongly about it. And we really believe that all children should have access to these resources, that this is actually meant for all children, not the quote unquote, I put it in quotes, sort of problem children that sometimes, teachers spend a lot of time, 90% of the time, or, on 10% of the kids or whatever it is. We believe that this is something that all children should have access to. And I just want to actually show you this kind of pyramid, which is really, I guess, our approach and our thinking when we approach like school-based work with kids. It's kind of like a multi-tiered approach, right? That you have your smaller percentage of kids that have, more serious, let's say, issues of mental health issues and challenges, and they need to be linked up to more formal mental health treatment. And then you have the kids that are struggling, and I think that's increased since COVID. Maybe it used to be 20%, and now it's maybe 30%, 35%, 40%. They maybe need softer services, maybe school-based counseling, maybe a social skills group, maybe a mentor, they need more softer, and then we call that selective interventions. And then you have the bottom of the pyramid, and that's something that interventions you want to do with all children, that 100% of the children should receive this type of, resilience building work and this access to social emotional learning. And that's very much our philosophy, and that's very much like our approach in bringing this workbook to schools, that this is something that really all children should have access to, and that it will help all of these children not just cope with what's in front of them, but really give them skills and tools that will hopefully really help them throughout their lives.
Thank you. You may have touched on this already, but if you could just tell us briefly, there are so many social emotional learning tools out there today. I read a book recently. It's called All Learning is Social and Emotional, right? Like everything that we do and everything that we teach, we can bring the lens of social emotional learning into everything we do. We can talk about resilience in characters, in literature. We can talk about it through Tanakh, through Bible classes, but let me ask you, what sets this resource apart when schools have so many other resources that they could draw from?
Right. So basically, thank you for asking that question. There is a lot of stuff out there already, and we really wanted to do something different and something that would add value. Not, kind of more of the same. There is a lot of stuff out there about emotions and about feelings. And so we really wanted to create something that kind of like added to that and builds upon that. So I'm going to actually call your attention to what that actually looks like. Okay, first, this is just some of the pages. Okay, so this is just some of the pages of the book. So in terms of the social emotional piece, so obviously this book does help create a feelings vocabulary for children, which is very important, giving them sort of that language to label and identify their emotions, right? But that is something that there are already a lot of tools like that. What's different, I think, about our book, one of the things there are two big things that are different about our book, and you'll hear from Dr. Baum also on that. But one of them is that we actually introduced a concept that is not really, I think, so well known and understood, and that is the concept of interoception. Interoception is the 8th sense. I think most people know about 5 senses, right? But there's actually 8 senses. The 6th and 7th senses are proprioceptive and vestibular, which usually are more commonly sort of known by occupational therapists. The eighth sense is, how do I know how I feel inside my own body? How do I recognize the internal sensations of my body? How do I know when I'm hungry? How do I know when I'm tired? How do I know when I'm sad, angry, or worried? So that's the sense of interoception. And that's not something that is so much talked about, although I think it's becoming a little bit more popularly sort of researched and sort of talked about now. But we really wanted to introduce the concept of interoception in this workbook, not only to recognize emotions and to label them and to give a form to process them, but also to help kids recognize, what does that feeling feel like inside their body? You know, what does it look like for them? And it's different for everyone, right? But to just introduce that concept of like, I actually feel sensations inside my body around this emotion. What does it feel like in my body? So that's really, I think, just a very important concept that's introduced in this book that's actually really different from what is already out there. I'm going to show you what that looks like on the pages. So I didn't actually put all of them, just like a sampling. So we have the angry, what does angry feel like inside my body? And what does worried feel like, the different ways that it feels for different kids. And then, part of the process of the workbook is helping the kids circle and identify what resonates with them. What does their body feel like when they feel these emotions? What does calm feel like, right? So never in the history of being told to calm down has anyone ever actually calmed down, right? But if you teach a child, what does calm feel like inside my body? How can I get myself to a place of calm? Then you actually are giving the child the tools to calm down, but doing it in a more like effective and empowering way. So that's kind of the idea behind it, is helping them, pay attention, sort of recognize and then pay attention to the sensations in their body so that they can recognize the emotion and manage the emotion before it gets out of control. So that's, I think, one thing that I think is different, interoception. And the second thing that I want to kind of pay attention to, that I want to point out here, is the coping tools. So we introduced the idea of a power pack in the workbook. And the power pack is sort of these like 8 buttons that represent different coping streams and different coping tools. And then we really, really developed these different coping streams like in the workbook to help the kids recognize what it might look like and then what resonates, for them. This is actually very loosely based on a model called Basic PH, Islands of Resilience, that was, I believe, pioneered by Dr. Muli Lahad. And Basic PH represents different coping streams: belief, affect, social, imagination, cognition, and physical. And it's based on this idea that we all have, that these are the main coping streams, and that we all sort of automatically favor one or two of these coping streams without maybe even thinking about it. And so what we did with this workbook is that we developed it a little bit more. It's loosely based on Basic PH. We actually added a couple more. And we wanted to help kids sort of learn about these different coping streams. And again, they automatically probably favor one or two without even realizing that, right? And this will help the kids become more self-aware. What are the coping streams that work for me? How can I develop these coping tools so that I kind of have them at the ready when I need them? So that's kind of the idea behind it. And I'm going to actually show you what those coping streams look like. So we have here, I can connect, connection, creativity, movement, physical, entertain myself, which is kind of distraction. And by the way, we actually use this with adults. Like, Ohel has, mental health treatment center, and we work with people with a very high level of needs, and we have wellness plans and even safety plans. And distraction is a very important, actually, coping tool. And so it's almost like laying the groundwork from a young age. And what could you use to cope? We don't want to call it distraction at this age. We called it entertain myself. We have, giving, kind of service to others, using my senses, which is kind of also loosely based on like DBT principles. And we have here, I can find quiet time, and I can say to myself, which is, kind of promoting the idea of like self-compassion, self-statement. And again, teaching them from a young age how to have self-compassion and what are the things they can say to themselves to put them, to cope when things are hard. And we kind of, I guess, like, there's a lot of pages, and this is just the sampling, but we kind of like sum it all up at the end, packing up, because they're on this journey, right, of resilience in outer space. So kind of like, packing up, like, what did you learn on this journey, and what are the tools in this power pack that is in your luggage, like for you, very unique to them. So that's kind of, I think, the second, I guess, important idea and tool that we included, in this workbook that I think sets it apart from others.
Thank you, Tivi. Thank you for that thorough overview of
Sure.
the workbook. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Naomi Bal, live from Israel, who we've really had the privilege of working closely together in also building the Resilient Schools pilot program. And Dr. Naomi Baum, I'd love to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about how you are implementing the Resilience Workbook on the ground in Israel. I know that everybody was working at record speed to, churning our wheels to get everything translated into Hebrew as quickly as we could, and make sure that you had this resource available and you could really be on the ground and help distribute it and train people and do whatever you're doing to help on the ground. If you could just tell us a little bit about that, we'd love to hear. Please unmute.
So, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to be here. And it's really been a pleasure to listen to Tzivi, because it's not often that you get to hear your ideas and your thoughts expressed so beautifully by somebody else. So, as Tzivi mentioned, this Resilience Workbook, which we are very proud of, and I'm truly grateful that Tzivi found it and took it under her wing, and she has really pushed it forward in a way that I'm sure I never would have been able to. So I'm really grateful for that. And now, with the very difficult situation we're experiencing here in Israel, with a lot of hard work and a lot of midnight oil burned on both sides of the ocean, we have, as of this week, the Hebrew version called Merchav Pnimi, which is not an exact translation, but an almost exact translation of the Resilience Workbook, Inner Space. We call it Merchav Pnimi is inner space. In English, there's a play on words about inner space and outer space, which is missing in Hebrew, and that's just fine, because people are very excited about this workbook. I posted just 2 days ago, I think. I can't even remember. My days are kind of blending together. Maybe it's 3 days. I think it's 2 days ago. On WhatsApp. That's really the only place I have pushed this so far. And just a small blurb with a picture of the front cover and 4 or 5 bullet points explaining what this workbook is, and the number of people requesting the workbook. We are well into the 7,000s, I think, and the publisher cannot publish them fast enough. So that is our biggest problem at this point. She has printed up close to 2,000 copies, and they have been snatched up, and people will be starting to use them Sunday. So, so far we have interest from the displaced families who are staying in the Dead Sea hotels, and the foster organization. It's the largest foster organization in Israel, called the Summit Center, who plan to bring this workbook to all of their foster kids, and are actually eager to do it now, but they assure me that they are interested in this workbook for the long term, because they really feel like it speaks to a need for them. And then there are the tens of elementary schools, guidance counselors and principals that have reached out to me. Kiryat Gat, Ofakim, the entire city of Netivot plans to implement this workbook. schools in Gush Etzion, where I live. It's already reached Jerusalem. I haven't had time yet to canvass the hotels in Jerusalem, but I will. And on and on. The list goes on. This workbook really meets a need. And that need is for kids to be able to express how they're feeling. Very often in stressful situations, parents don't have the extra energy to deal with, they're trying to figure out just the very basics, food on the table, and keeping the kids clean, and whatever else, keeping them busy. The kids weren't in school for 2 weeks. To have the extra energy to sit and have a quiet conversation about feelings is often a luxury which they feel they can't afford, but I feel they cannot overlook or miss. And therefore, this workbook really fits a niche. And particularly now that schools are going back, kindergartens are going back, teachers have the opportunity. They want to talk about current events. They want to talk about how kids are feeling, and they often don't know how to go about doing it. I am really excited to be here because I want to hear Yuta talk about how she's used this in her classroom. But I know that this is something, my experience, I've used this workbook all over the world, not this particular version, which is beautiful and expanded. And if I think about how the workbook started, the idea, the kernel of the workbook, the idea that you can talk with kids about feelings and you can encourage it through a workbook, a hands-on workbook, is the original idea. But the progress that this workbook has made is incredible over the years, and particularly this version. The designer who we're working with deserves not only an honorable mention, but a place of glory here, because her work has been incredible, and her dedication to getting the Hebrew version out has been absolutely remarkable. She has really worked, she and her staff have worked incredibly hard, and she is really a perfectionist. And for that, I am grateful, because I am not a perfectionist, and I need somebody like that on the team. So we're very excited about getting this out. What we're planning to do, because it's just going like hotcakes, I've been planning for the last 2 days and haven't gotten to it, but tomorrow morning I'm going to film a training session. Hopefully the slideshow will be ready, and I will be filming it on Zoom, and then we are going to provide the link to teachers so that they can use it. I'm going to try to keep it short, probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I really want to keep it because people don't have time. Just the nitty-gritty about how to use this workbook, how I think that they can use this workbook. And of course, I think Yuta's going to add a lot more to that discussion. But that is the goal. And Ohel has been exceptionally gracious in funding the first 20,000 copies in Hebrew. And that's incredible. People can't believe it. In the letters they write to me, how much does this workbook cost? And I write back, we have this wonderful donation, and they're just beside themselves. So, one of the things we know about resilience, one feature of resilience, is support. And we feel supported. Ohel is really supporting us here, and it feels good, and it helps our resilience as a people. I think it's really been very exciting to work on this, very exciting to see this come out. And everybody I give the workbook to, I say, now I want pictures and stories, because we want the feedback. You want it, I want it just as much. I want to hear that our hard work is paying off, and that people are really benefiting. Kids are benefiting, parents are benefiting, and teachers are benefiting from using this workbook.
Thank you, Naomi. It's great to hear that, the resources are really being shared with those who need it. I wanted to ask you if you could share with us from, all of your experience being on the ground as a trauma specialist and a resilience specialist in Israel, if you could share a little bit with us about the research basis behind this workbook. Yes, it has a beautiful design, and St. Raskin deserves all of our credit for producing a masterpiece, and really, spearheading the creative design. Tell us a little bit about what's the evidence base behind the concepts in the book.
Okay, so the original concepts in the book are based on the Building Resilience intervention, which is an intervention that I developed based on my reading of the research literature back in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s in Israel, we were in the throes of the Second Intifada, and life was extremely stressful. There were roadside shootings, and there were bus bombs going off, mostly in Jerusalem, but not only. Very significant terrorist attacks. And in Israel at the time, we were very good at dealing with the immediate crisis, but we were not very good at looking at the long-term effects and the possible traumatic impact on kids and on people. The tendency was to say, okay, we've taken care of it, we've talked about it, we've debriefed, and now under the carpet and life is back to normal. And my sense was that this is something that needed to be explored, and the carpet needed to be lifted, and we needed to have a better look at how people were feeling and teach people some basic mental health. And part of the Building Resilience intervention was based on the notion that explaining to people about the mind-body connection, teaching them emotional regulation, teaching them how to breathe, how to use their bodies, understanding how stress is in the body, stored in the body, teaching people that while denial has its place, very often it takes a lot of energy, and allowing emotions into our lives and understanding that they come and they go, and we don't always stay at that very, very high level of emotion, whether it be sadness, grief, or fear. It just doesn't happen. If you allow yourself to experience it, it'll peak and then it'll go down. And learning, reminding ourselves what we need to do to cope, how we can cope, and finally looking at the importance of meaning. And in the case right now, what I've been talking about a lot is meaningful activity, but meaning takes lots and lots of forms. So these were really what we called the four pillars, what I called the four pillars. I always tried to make it into something catchy. It never quite worked. So I called the first pillar self, and the second pillar, what did I call it? Strengths, but what really I meant is emotions, but I couldn't figure out an S word for emotions. And the third word was support, and then I added on all sorts of other things, and the final word was significance, which is kind of like meaning. But I've kind of abandoned the four S's and just talk about the four pillars, because I think that's really what's essential. And what we did is the gold standard when you're doing research is to do a double blind controlled study. Very, very, very difficult to do in the real world. So what we did is a semi-controlled study, a quasi-experimental, I can't even remember how it's called anymore, but we did it a long time ago after the Second Lebanese War in the city of Akko, which was pretty hard hit. Well, we thought at the time it was hard hit. There were 7 people who lost their lives. Now it sounds like, oh my goodness. But the town was really well shaken up during the Second Lebanese War, and we did an intervention where we had 4 elementary schools on board, and we trained their teachers in what we call the building resilience intervention. And these 4 pillars really are the same pillars that form the basis of the workbook. They're at the core of the workbook. And as I said, there's been a lot of development from that core, but that core still exists in the workbook. And what we found is that teachers who were trained in the BRI in 4 group sessions, they were fairly long group sessions. And I say that to you, Carly. They weren't 45-minute sessions. They were 2.5-hour sessions, but there were 4 sessions. Teachers who were trained and then learned how to bring resilience tools into the classroom, their students were much better off, had much fewer post-traumatic symptoms, much less anxiety than a comparable group of students from the same town whose teachers had not yet undergone the training. And then we, of course, trained the second group of teachers, and this group of students in the second round, their symptoms also went down and their anxiety went down. So that is really the evidence base we have, which is we published a nice study in a well-respected professional journal, and that became part of the evidence base for this workbook. The workbook has never officially been researched. It would be rather complicated to do that, to double blind and get everybody's permission. I don't even want to think about that. Maybe someday somebody will do that. But what happens is that our organizations like Ohel and like the organizations that I've worked with, simply don't have the funding to run massive high-level research for the most part, because they're involved in providing services on the ground. And that's really what this workbook does. But that would be the evidence base for this workbook.
Thank you, Naomi. Actually, we are in talks looking to study this workbook and the impact of the workbook, and we can reveal more information when we're ready to reveal that information. Thank you so much for providing your wisdom and your expertise. I'm going to share a little bit of information now on how this resilience workbook could be rolled out in schools. We really believe that, like Sivi mentioned and Dr. Bal mentioned, it's not a matter of you buy the workbook or you download the workbook, you do it with your students, and a week later you're all resilient, right? Building resilience is a journey, and we have so much to learn. And like we said before, it's a parallel process. The work first starts with the educators. So I'm going to share screen and I'm going to show you, we've developed a wonderful teacher's guide to accompany the workbook. Let me just share screen. Hopefully I will be able to do this. Okay, great. So I hope everybody can now see. We just yesterday uploaded the Resilience Workbook, the teacher's guide, onto Ohel's webpage, and you can go on ohelfamily.org under the section that says resources, and you'll be able to see this teacher's guide. And the teacher's guide is not, a 10-page quick guide that will walk you through, just give you a few ideas. As you can see, I'm going to scroll down. We have really broken down each of the sections of the workbook, and then we have accompanying activities that go along with the different themes that we've brought up in the workbook. So for example, in talking about gratitude, we have pages on gratitude in the workbook. We have also included a whole lot of different gratitude exercises. So we've got, for example, a gratitude journal, gratitude letter, gratitude tree. We've got, other exercises that reflect on mindfulness. We've got other emotion regulation exercises as well. And I'm going to scroll back up to the content section. So we've really delved into what is resilience, why is resilience so important. We've delved into the topic of why create a workbook, with really the premise behind it that we give children, creative expression. We give children the opportunity to interact with the workbook in whichever way they choose. So children can They can write, they can draw, they can interact with it in many, many different ways. And we go through step by step, according to different developmental age bands, how we recommend implementing the workbook. And then we go through the different themes that are incorporated throughout the workbook. So we talk about the idea of emotion regulation. We talk about the idea of co-regulation, which is the basic idea that the teacher is really the emotional compass and the anchor in the classroom. And when the teacher stays regulated, the teacher is able to transfer and help the child in the classroom regulate together with them. So for example, getting down on eye-to-eye level with a child, doing some deep breathing together, checking in with them in many, many different ways, which we detail in the workbook. Those are different ways that we can foster a sense of emotion regulation, which is also one of the building blocks of resilience. We then focus on exploring emotions, and then we move to the power pack, and we really explain the theory behind the power pack and how you can bring that to life in the classroom. We speak about the idea of, like Dr. Bal mentioned before, we know that feeling support and feeling a sense of connection is one of the strongest protective factors for a person's resilience. So we really build in a way to check in with children, make sure that they can identify who are the people they can talk to in school, who are the people they can go to at home. Then we also have incorporated some positive psychology concepts that are really very strongly tied to the building of resilience and building of thriving and well-being. And we've then spent the last section of the workbook talking about what if there's a child in your classroom that is struggling with completing a page that, for example, is on the page anxious or sad, or what if you notice something that makes you a little bit curious about what's going on for a particular child? What if a child is completing the page on social supports and is unable to complete the page and can't write down can't write down, but has not written on their page who are the people they can talk to? So as you can see, the workbook really offers the teacher a wonderful lens into a child's world that they may not have been able to explore had they only been sticking to math, literature, or whatever else they may be wanting to cover in the regular school day. And then we've got a whole lot of FAQs. I'll just mention again, there's about, I can't even count how many additional social emotional learning activities that you can then launch into with your students. And we highly, we've made this freely available for download because we want it in the hands of teachers. I will say that in order to roll out this workbook, you are welcome to contact, and we'll put it in the chat, schoolresources@ohelfamily.org. We're going to send you a recording at the end of this webinar. You'll get the recording for this webinar, and you'll also get the address where you can email any questions you have about the workbook and connect with us on how to bring this to your school. So as part of the rollout of the Resilience Workbook, we have training available for schools. We highly recommend that you train your teachers in implementing this workbook. And then we're also available to coach you throughout implementation of the workbook. And we can connect with you about purchasing books for your student body. I will also share screen, and I'm going to share with you a little bit, just briefly, because we may be going a little bit over time today. We want to just talk to you about Ohel's other resilience-related resources. So we have just this morning launched a landing page for Ohel social emotional learning resources for schools. As you can see, we will send you this link as well. It's ohelfamily.org/service/school services, and you can see the full range of resilience-based resources that we have available. So we have a brochure on helping children cope after trauma. We have the wonderful book that Dr. Baum and Civi Ryder co-wrote called I Feel That Way and That's Okay. And we have a complete teacher's manual also with social emotional learning activities. And we have training and support for your schools around that. We have the new Inner Space Resilience Workbook, which we've been speaking to you about. We have a middle school program, the Middle School Anxiety Prevention Program, which I was able to teach myself in the classroom and was honored to have been the pilot school that implemented this model. We were recently joined by Communities Confronting Substance Use and Addiction, an incredible group, an incredible team that goes into schools and does programming directly with students, with teachers, with parents around substance use prevention. That's for middle school and high school. And we also have the Building Resilience Intervention program, which is building a combination of building resilience and also building a trauma-informed and a trauma-sensitive school environment. That is currently a pilot model that I've been honored to work with Dr. Baum on. And we have been piloting it in schools here and in South Florida. And we, please God, are going to be continuing to pilot this model this year. We also have mental health first aid, and we have a teacher support helpline. You will be able to access all of those resources from this website, and we're always available for your support. The teacher support helpline has extended hours now from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. And we've been fielding many requests from schools for support in processing the tragic events that are going on in Israel at the moment. I'm going to turn it over now to Jutta Malka, who we are honored to have with us today, our master educator. And as you can see, as I said before, she is live from the classroom, and she is a master in the field of social emotional learning as well. So Jutta Malka, I'd love for you to, you've implemented the Resilience Workbook, the COVID-19 Resilience Workbook. And I know that you're planning on implementing, or perhaps you've already implemented, the Inner Space Resilience Workbook. I know I've been sampling it on my own children and others, but if you could talk to us about how you implemented the workbook and what you've learned from the process, and anything you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear.
Sure. So this is my lunch break, everyone. Shortly to be ended. So basically, I was able to start the Inner Space book this year, and I just had a couple of sessions with them. So I will show you what I have. I did not, some of the pictures that Civi showed were from the COVID workbook that I had used. I actually used it last year, even with some of the kids, and definitely the prior year before. And what I do is it's usually once a week for a lesson. And, you know, sometimes you might need one more if you need, but it's generally a once a week lesson. And I use the workbook not entirely by itself, but I use it like as a supplement. Like I will create lessons around the workbook pages, and I will supplement it with other sheets or other learning or other YouTube videos or, whatever else that I, conjure up for the lesson. So what I'll do is, let's say, for example, like I was looking at the teacher's guide, and we talked about the candle, the flower candle breathing, which was in the original COVID resilience workbook. And like, that would usually be my first lesson of the year. And I'll have the kids draw a picture of a flower and a picture of a candle. And I say, what do we do to the flower? And everyone smells it. And then, pick up your candle. What do you do to the candle? We blow it out. And then we'll go like this, like, smell the flower, not the candle, and then, if you, depending on your budget or whatever it is, you could have the kids or time, you can have the kids create more of a flower and a candle. And actually, I did think about that, but my teacher budget got used up. So I didn't end up doing that, but I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should do that this year. I forgot. So you can be creative with it. And then like, we'll have a breathing exercise. So then the kids will learn, like when we say calm down, breathe, they don't even know what breathe means. Like I find breathe, they're like, they don't even know what it means. So we have to like teach them when you breathe in and your stomach goes out. It's like, it's an entire lesson. So that was like one lesson. And then like what I did was, for the COVID resilience booklet, I like had them paste things over like the front pages, I just pasted my own things like say for example, in the beginning, I would just like cover these pages, with my own stuff. But then I got a little advanced as I, went forward with creating the lessons. And so, for example, we have our SEL folders, social emotional learning. And then in that folder, we have the resilience, the resilience book. and I will have the kids create their own little workbook, and that's where I started putting the sheets. So, for example, and then we haven't started yet, but then I'll have each kid have like a little feeling journal, which was modeled after, in the back of the resilience book, there was like a 1 week little chart where the kids would circle a little face, an emotion face, kind of like a little emoji, and it would say what the emotion was. How do you feel today? Happy, sad. And so I created a little feeling journal based on that, where there's a little face, and they fill in the face and they write, today I'm feeling whatever it is because, and that's a little feeling journal. I actually have a copy of it if we want to see that, of the pages. So then here's the SEL. They make their own little cover, and they make a little, even though they have a self-portrait in there, they're like required to do it in the school. So we put it in here, and then this kid just stuck her own picture in. And what they'll do is they'll tell me, like, this is me. I went to the park. I felt really happy, and she just wanted to put it into her booklet. So for example, a lot of the time you will actually learn some interesting things about your students when you're doing the workbooks. Like, you'll read what they wrote and you're like, oh, this is interesting. So this class is a second grade. It is a combination of regular ed kids and special ed students who have different IEPs and special needs. So some of the kids can write more efficiently than others, and some of the kids, will just use drawings more, and they'll have to explain it to me. And there's lots of inventive spelling. And I chose second grade because I felt like the booklet is definitely, is somewhere in an elementary school. And I felt like first graders, the kids are just starting to learn to write, so they're still struggling with that. So it's like, it was a little more tedious. And then as they get older, they get a little more like, sassy about what they want to write or not write, or embarrassed, and it just gets more complicated. And it was like easier in smaller groups. So second grade was just like a really, like second and third grade are like really cute little grades where they're still ready to like share. And then I'll have the kids come up and present, like at the end, like we'll have, I'll do the lesson, then they'll go off, I'll present whatever, let's say, for example, we did, let's say, the self-portrait. So we'll talk about drawing yourself. I'll show some self-portraits of like famous painters, and then talk about like what I look like, what you look like, how important, how each of us look, and how we have different hair colors, and how, how beautiful every person is. And then they draw their own, and that was like the lesson. And afterwards, whoever wants can get up and present it to the class. So they learn how to, like, for example, this page, this kid wrote something, and, they write their name, the school, their age. And something interesting about me is I'm a good helper at home and school. And it's interesting, kids wrote different things. One of the kids wrote, which is fascinating, because something interesting about me is that my family doesn't live in this country. And that was interesting. And I asked her a little bit about that. And some of the members of her family are back in, their home country. And this was like, oh, like something important for me to know, that like, she might miss, a family member who's not there, or they might be in a place that's not as safe as here, and they might be worried. So you learn a lot of interesting things about the kids just from reading it. And then we started with my home, and we talked about people live in different kind of houses. And one of the things that we talked about in the home is, we talked about, the next page was my family. So we had a little introduction of what is a family, where do we live? And that was like a combination lesson. And, I have a little read aloud story, My Family Special, and it's called My Family Special, and it shows, their little creatures. Each one has different family members and how many people, and we talk about that every family is created with at least 2 people, and some people can have 15 people in their family. Some people have 2 people in their family, and everybody has to have 2. And then, the kids wrote their family, and we talked about the family or all the people who live inside your house, because they can confuse cousins or friends. And then we had, and then we talk about our friends as separate from part of our family. And some of the kids wrote their friends' names, some of them kids wrote something about their friends. And then the next one was about what makes me unique. And we had a little lesson about, are we all the same? Do we all like the same, do we have the same habits? And you'd be surprised, the kids like, and I say, like, do I like the same things that you like? Do I like to eat the same foods that you like? And they're like, they think about it. And I'm like, this is what makes us special. We have different feelings. And then the kids write something, and again, you learn a lot about the kids when you, and I fill it in myself, about myself, so they can, so I model it. And then, you know, like, I'm good at art, I like to draw other people, like Daisy, and she writes 2 kids in her class. I would like to get better at sports, I like to do gymnastics, spelled JIM.
It's a mark.
SDR, yeah. Do you want me to
If I could just interrupt you for one
Go ahead.
second, we're getting a lot of questions coming in.
Okay.
Where people are asking, in a typical classroom day or in the schedule of a classroom, right?
Yeah.
We recommend that you roll out about 2 pages at a time. Let's say you do, you know, it wouldn't be that you have your workbook and you finish it in a week. And like I said before,
Yeah, I do it over once a week. It
So
generally
talk to
takes
us
about a year.
talk to us about like practical implementation. If you could just, we don't
Yeah.
have a lot of
So
time.
that's what I'm
left.
saying. So basically what you're doing is like this. This is here. So I'm sorry if I wasn't so clear. So for example, lesson 1, the introduction. We talk about ourselves. We talk about self-portraits, who we are. Each of us are individual. Let's look at our friends. Do we have the same hair color, eye color, blah, blah, blah. And that is lesson 1. We just, like, you know, have each kid, you can have the kids hold a mirror to look at themselves when they draw themselves. It's about looking at yourselves, being proud of yourselves. And I give like a whole little lesson, how every person is beautiful. I have a little read aloud that's called I am me. And the little girl is, you know, saying, you know, she has curly hair and some of her friends have straight hair, and, you know, and that's like lesson 1. Lesson 2 was my home. And then we talk about who lives in our house, who do we live with, what does a family mean? And they draw their home, they drew their family, and then whoever had time drew their friends. The friends I didn't really focus on, but you know, you can, but whoever, like, afterwards, again, they have their workbook in their desk. Anytime you finish some work, you can go back and just draw, you know,
So-
fix your drawing.
So
you
would
know.
you say that you're doing, let's say, 2 pages?
2
That's like
2 pages a
2
day.
pages per day.
Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 1. For example, you know, well, I'm saying this one is 2 pages, but it was really only 1 written page.
Okay.
And I feel like it depends on what my lesson is, you know. And then let's say, for example, I take some of the lessons from the teacher's book. Let's say the breathing lesson I usually do as the first introduction of the year. They draw their candle and their flower, and we breathe, and then we can always use it throughout the year. And then this was like really interesting here. So we did the feelings I know. So this was the next lesson. I have a little song on YouTube called Spot of Emotion, and it goes through how the little spot gets tangled with their emotions. And then you know, most of the emotions match these, and then I have, like, on the board, I have the kids just tell me what are feelings that you have, and I write down all the feelings that the kids have, and I have a whole list of feelings on the board, of feelings that they know. And then, for example, you draw the feeling of your face now. So, which is fascinating. Look at this, what this kid wrote. She wrote, I feel angry because everyone is mean. I said, because most of the kids write, I'm happy, happy, happy. I have one kid who was really cute, I'm excited, and put stickers on. And you'll be able to, so this was really good. This was like, it happened in the moment. And I saw, like, the 2 kids, she sat with 2 kids. We have something called flexible seating. So when we do the workbook, the kids can sit wherever they want. And then, you know, she was working with 2 other girls, and they got into a little fight with each other because one person touched the other person's workbook or whatever silly thing happened. And so they separated, and she sat by herself, and she expressed herself quite clearly of how she was feeling, which at this point was angry. And, you know, other kids wrote happy. I was excited because my uncle's coming today or whatever. So you learn about your kids, and then what I do is I just walk around the room while they're drawing, and I will ask them, so how do you feel? Why do you feel that way? Which one did you pick? You know, and then she, like, circled, you see, she circled angry, and each kid will circle. And again, I don't always remember from 25 kids what all their feelings are. And I don't always get to every kid, but slowly but surely throughout the year, we're going through it. And then I'm getting the kids to express themselves, you know, quite clearly. And I'll have kids like as young as, you know, I've done it with like 4-year-olds, and they'll tell me, I was feeling very angry. He made me feel upset. I felt upset because when you give them the language, they start, as the year goes on, they start being able to express themselves. Like, why are you upset? Why don't you want to do this? And they don't always know, like, they just don't have the language of kids. So yeah, so generally it's like, you know, 1 to 2 pages per lesson, because like I figured, like, here, this book has, the other book had about 37, 38. So I figured like it's about 40 weeks in the year, you know, a little less. So we do 1 page, and then some of them are just fun coloring and, like, you know, but I don't use it as just like, I don't just give it to them and then like theoretically I can hand this to them and they can just read it and do it, but I turn it into a lesson with each like set of pages is generally a
As a
lesson.
prompt, as a prompt.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just want to add in
Make
that
a
the way that
comment.
oh,
I
sorry.
want to
go
just make a
Yeah.
comment. So you are the superstar teacher, because we would love every teacher to do it exactly the way you do it. But I think we know reality, and many teachers will just do 2 pages every few days or 2 pages once a week. And you know, it's wonderful. And this whole teacher's guide that Carly has spearheaded and we've written together has you know, has all these expansion ideas of what you can do and how you can do it. Some of them
I
you've
love the
mentioned.
expansion ideas.
Yeah, some of them you've mentioned, some of them I think we might have even learned from you.
Yeah.
But I just want to reassure the people who are listening that it's really okay also to do maybe the skinny version, I might call it, which is just doing 2 pages every few days or once a week. It's still going to be valuable. So I
Yes.
don't want you to scare them off. I
Yes.
think you're fabulous. I think you have great ideas.
Right.
Uh,
And I think
but I recognize that not all teachers are going to do that. And I
Right.
think it's important to mention.
Yeah, one thing I just want to say also, and Dr. Brown is 100% right, because we don't want to scare off some of the teachers who are going to say, well, I can't do that. It does require a lot of preparation and forethought and planning, but that also when the teacher, even if you just use the workbook, but you use the language or you model the coping tools, like that makes all the difference in the world. When you kind of like own the process and sort of model it, that really makes a very big difference. Like that alone is golden.
right. And that's why we want to bring these tools directly to teachers. You know, our training will really prepare you to be able to launch into this workbook in your classroom. But interventions like these work best when the teacher owns it and when the teacher adds their own creative flair to it, so that, you know, the kids really see that you believe in it. And it's something that is a project that you begin together. And I think that you'll learn a lot about your students. You'll have a window into their inner world of emotions that you may not have seen before. And it'll really be a launching pad for you to be able to engage in wonderful conversations with your students, with your colleagues. And we're really thankful that you joined us here today. And we will be sending you the recording of this webinar with information on how to contact us to order the workbook. The workbook, just to clarify, in Israel, it is being rolled out and distributed to many, many families and many individuals who are in need in Israel. For American orders or orders overseas, you'd be in touch with us, school resources at ohelfamily.org. And we'd be happy to work with you and bring this training and bring this resource to you, as well as the other resources that we spoke about today. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. Thank you to our incredible panelists. And we wish you a wonderful day, and we wish that this war will be over before we know it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.